Your DNA contains roughly 20,000 genes, the blueprint for everything you are: your height, your eye color, the shape of your face, the way your brain processes language, the fact that you can process language at all. Every cell in your body carries this code. It's yours. It's been passed down through an unbroken chain of ancestors, stretching back millions of years. But here's something most people never hear about. Roughly 8% of your DNA isn't human. It's viral. Ancient viral code. Inserted into the genome of your ancestors millions of years ago by retroviruses that infected them, embedded their own genetic material into the host DNA, and never left. Your body is carrying code that was written by something else, and your cells are reading it. Right now, that's the version science is comfortable with. Viral insertion. Random. Undirected. Natural. But what if not all of the foreign code in your DNA was written by viruses? What if some of it was written on purpose? Let's start with what we know for certain. The human genome contains approximately 3.2 billion base pairs. When scientists finished mapping it in 2003, the Human Genome Project, one of the largest scientific endeavors in history, they expected to find a clean, elegant blueprint. What they found was much stranger. Only about 1.5% of your DNA actually codes for proteins, the functional machinery of your body. The remaining 98.5% was initially called junk DNA. Scientists assumed it was evolutionary debris, leftover code from millions of years of random mutation with no current function. That assumption turned out to be wrong. Over the past 2 decades, researchers have discovered that much of this so-called junk DNA has regulatory functions. It controls when and how the protein coding genes are expressed. It's not junk. It's the control panel. But here's where it gets strange. A significant portion of human DNA, roughly 8%, consists of endogenous retroviruses, ERVs. These are the remnants of ancient viral infections. At some point in our evolutionary history, retroviruses infected our ancestors, inserted their genetic material into the host genome, and that code was passed down through every subsequent generation. Some of these viral insertions are tens of millions of years old. They predate the existence of modern humans by an enormous margin. And remarkably, some of them have been co-opted by the human body. They serve functions now. One ERV-derived gene, syncytin, is essential for the formation of the placenta. Without this piece of ancient viral code, human pregnancy as we know it would be impossible. Your body took code from an external source, a virus, and built something essential out of it. That's documented. That's real. That's not disputed by anyone. Now, here's the question this raises. If external code can be inserted into a genome and become functional, if it can be inherited generation after generation for millions of years, then the mechanism exists for someone to do it deliberately. Not a virus. Not randomly. Someone. With intent. With a goal. The delivery system isn't theoretical. It's already in your DNA. Human evolution should be a gradual process, and for the most part it is. Small changes accumulating over millions of years. Natural selection favoring advantageous traits. Survival of the fittest, played out across geological timescales. But the fossil record contains moments where this gradual process seems to skip. Around 2.5 million years ago, our ancestors' brains began to grow. Over the next 2 million years, the human brain nearly tripled in size. From roughly 400 cubic centimeters in early hominids to approximately 1,400 cubic centimeters in modern humans. That rate of growth is, by evolutionary standards, extraordinarily fast. Brain tissue is the most metabolically expensive tissue in the body. A larger brain requires dramatically more energy, more complex blood supply, more sophisticated cooling mechanisms, and fundamentally different skull architecture. Every one of those changes needs to co-evolve simultaneously. A bigger brain without adequate blood supply is fatal. A bigger skull without a wider birth canal is fatal. The number of simultaneous coordinated genetic changes required to triple brain size in 2 million years is, according to some researchers, difficult to account for through random mutation and natural selection alone. Difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. Then there's a second jump. Approximately 70,000 years ago, something happened that anthropologists call the Great Leap Forward, sometimes called the cognitive revolution. Humans who had existed for hundreds of thousands of years with relatively stable behavior suddenly began creating art. Complex language, abstract thought, symbolic reasoning, trade networks, burial rituals that suggest belief in an afterlife. The biological hardware, the brain, hadn't changed significantly. The same 1,400 cubic centimeters. The same skull. The same neural architecture. But the software changed. Dramatically. Almost overnight in evolutionary terms. Something switched on. And no one can fully explain what triggered it. In 1973, Francis Crick published a paper that surprised the scientific community. Francis Crick wasn't a fringe theorist. He was the co-discoverer of the structure of DNA, the double helix itself. He shared the Nobel Prize for it. He is one of the most important biologists in human history. And in 1973, he proposed seriously, in a peer-reviewed journal, that life on Earth may have been deliberately seeded by an extraterrestrial civilization. He called it directed panspermia. The standard panspermia hypothesis suggests that life's building blocks, amino acids and organic molecules, were delivered to Earth naturally by comets or meteorites. This is mainstream science. We've found amino acids on meteorites. The raw materials of life exist throughout the cosmos. Crick took it further. He argued that the complexity and universality of Earth's genetic code, the fact that every living thing on this planet uses the same fundamental DNA machinery, was consistent with a single, deliberate seeding event. One source. One design. Distributed intentionally. He wasn't claiming this was proven. He was saying the evidence didn't rule it out, and that the uniformity of life's genetic code was, in his words, a reasonable alternative to purely terrestrial origin. Now extend Crick's hypothesis across time. If an intelligence seeded life on Earth, placed the initial genetic code here deliberately, would they simply walk away? Or would they monitor the experiment? Check the results. And if the experiment wasn't developing as intended, if evolution was too slow or moving in the wrong direction, would they intervene? A small edit. A targeted insertion. A gene activated here. A gene suppressed there. Not rewriting the entire genome. That would be detectable. Just nudging. Directing. Adjusting the code at key moments. A brain growth gene activated 2.5 million years ago. A cognitive function unlocked 70,000 years ago. Subtle enough to look natural. Significant enough to change everything. Everything we've discussed so far is in the past. Ancient viral insertions. Evolutionary jumps millions of years ago. A hypothesis from 1973. But what if the editing isn't finished? Consider what's happened to humans in the last 10,000 years. A blink of an eye in evolutionary terms. We've developed lactose tolerance. The ability to digest milk in adulthood. This trait appeared roughly 7,500 years ago and spread through certain populations with remarkable speed. The standard explanation is natural selection driven by the advent of dairy farming. And that's probably correct. But the speed at which it spread and the multiple independent origins of the same mutation in different populations has raised questions among geneticists. It's not that the standard explanation fails. It's that the trait appeared and proliferated faster than typical selective pressures would predict. Then there's the FOXP2 gene, sometimes called the language gene. A variant of FOXP2 specific to humans is believed to be critical for the development of complex speech and language. The human version differs from the chimpanzee version by just 2 amino acid changes. 2. That's all it took to give us language. Those 2 changes appeared roughly 200,000 years ago. Why then? What selective pressure specifically demanded complex language at that moment, when our ancestors had survived successfully without it for millions of years? And here's something even more recent. In the last few decades, geneticists have identified regions of the human genome that are undergoing what they call selective sweeps. Areas where a specific genetic variant is spreading through the population much faster than random drift would explain. Something is being selected for. Right now, in our current genome, we don't fully understand what's being selected, or why, or what's driving the selection pressure. We assume it's natural, environmental, dietary, cultural. But we assume that because the alternative, that something is still editing the code, is a possibility we're not prepared to consider. You carry 3.2 billion base pairs in every cell of your body. 8% of them were written by something other than human evolution. Vast regions of your genome were dismissed as junk for decades because we didn't understand what they did. How much of your own code have you actually read? And how much of it was written for you, rather than by you? If this is the kind of question that changes how you see yourself, subscribe. We ask one of these every week. Here's what makes this hypothesis so difficult to sit with. It's not abstract. It's not happening in a distant galaxy or at the bottom of the ocean or behind the sun. It's inside you, right now, in every cell of your body, in the code that makes you who you are. If your DNA has been edited, if key moments in human evolution were nudged by an external intelligence, you wouldn't know. There would be no scar, no visible seam. The edits would look exactly like natural mutations because they would use the same machinery, the same base pairs, the same insertion mechanisms that viruses have been using for millions of years. The only difference would be intent. And intent doesn't leave a chemical signature. Your brain, the organ you're using to process these words right now, may exist in its current form because something decided it should. The language you're hearing these ideas in may be possible because 2 amino acids were changed in a single gene at a specific moment in history. The capacity for abstract thought that allows you to even consider this question, the ability to imagine, to speculate, to wonder what if, might itself be the product of an edit. Which means the tool you'd use to investigate this, your own mind, is potentially the evidence. You can't step outside your own genome to examine it objectively. You can't think about your own thinking without using the thinking that might have been designed. If your DNA was edited, the edit is thinking about itself right now. And it has no way to know. We've spent 5 videos now looking at the things that might be watching us, editing us, warning everyone but us, hiding from us, hiding behind our own sun. But everything we've explored so far has come from out there, from space, from above, from beyond. What if the most unsettling discovery isn't above us? It's below us. 70% of Earth's surface is covered by water. We've explored less than 5% of the ocean floor. And what lives in those depths, what has lived there for hundreds of millions of years, long before anything crawled onto land, might not have come from space at all. It might have been here first, watching us evolve, watching the edits take hold. What if the ocean is hiding an intelligence older than humans,